Welcome to today's episode of the Epic IEP, where we share stories that might be frustrating, funny, or fantastic, but how we walk through the IEP process. It's going to be a little bit longer, but you're going to want to wait to the end. It's a good story. So we were sitting in an IEP meeting, and I want to write a book called "I Can't Make It Up," except for that would be a violation of people's privacy. But I want you to know that the meetings that we go into and the meetings that we participate in. Here's what you never know: what is actually going to happen in the IEP meeting. It doesn't sit in the agenda. It's not in the present levels, because you know what happens in an IEP meeting? There are people involved, and people with their purview, their perceptions, their patterns of pathologies, and I'm one of them. And so when I'm training people, I always say that we prepare for consensus and we expect anything else. And so we were in an IEP meeting, and really, I can't make it up. I could make it up, but it would sound less true than what really happens. And we're in an IEP meeting, students greatly impacted by the comorbidities of his disability. And he has a unique condition where he was born without arms. His hands grow out of his chest, and he's impacted by that, obviously. And he's learning to walk. He's learning to ambulate. He's learning to move through the room. And the teacher said, "Well, what do you mean he's learning to move through the room?" I said, "Well, where's he going to be all day?" And she said, "We're going to put him in this chair, and it has a little belt on it." Oh, okay. And so it was a young kiddo's class. And I was like, "Oh, but he uses a voice output communication device." And she said, "Okay." And I said, "So how will he get to use that when he's moving across the room?" And she said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "He moves." And she said, "But he doesn't have any knees. And how does he do that?" I said, "He's just a little miracle worker. That's how he does it." And she said, "Well, how often will he be moving?" Daily. He's going to move daily. She goes, "Well, how will we know when that's going to happen?" He'll start to move. Like I can't make this stuff up. And so later in the year, we're going through the IEP process, and we're struggling to come to consensus. And the teacher said, well, I don't know about all of these things that you're wanting. The attorney said that. The director said that. We were wanting some really silly things, like the school to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Accessible. And most playgrounds in America aren't accessible. And he needs to be able to access the playground just like everybody else. Most playgrounds have mulch on the ground. And I said, these are ADA requirements. And the executive director said, "Well, we wouldn't have been able to open the school if we weren't ADA compliant." Really? You got the ADA police just driving up and down your streets? I said, you would have been able to get a permit to build a school, right? And the ADA doesn't show up everywhere. And so I said, he needs to be able to access, the motor lab. He needs to be able to access the cafeteria, and crazy the playground. And finally, the attorney, she'd had enough of it. She'd heard enough of listening to Karen Mayer Cunningham. She said, "Let me just tell you something. Based upon the seriousness of his disabilities, I don't know if ADA compliance should even be a consideration." What? And so when you're advocating, and we're all advocates, whether you're the principal, the attorney, the parent, the advocate, we're all advocates. You never know what people are going to say. But let me tell you, know that if you let people talk long enough, they will tell you what they believe to be true. And so, of course, that didn't go so well. And we opened a federal complaint. But I want you to know, as I listen to people and train people naturally and listen to all the comments, there is this thread that goes through the comments that you shouldn't be allowed to be an advocate unless you were this, that, or the other thing. And an advocate is somebody that speaks for somebody that can't speak for themselves. And when we are the adults in that meeting, all of us are the advocates. We are all speaking for that student. And you have to know and believe that people see things differently. People have different perspectives. People have different input, which is why we're all in the IEP meeting. And you would never be in any other place in your life and somebody disagreed and you were offended. Why are we offended that the parent wants something different than the school wants? Why are we offended that the principal might see things differently than the attorney? Why are we offended that the advocate might have input that the district hadn't thought about? We're supposed to do that, right? We're supposed to make sure that we're writing an epic IEP for this kiddo to be successful. And that is our job. And so I want you to use your critical thinking. I want you to think about what you've been taught as it relates to IEP meetings. Were you taught by somebody in the school district? Were you taught by somebody at college? Were you taught by somebody in ASHA? Were you taught by somebody in the National Board of Psychologists? Were you taught by somebody who teaches music therapist certification. Ask yourself, did that person teach me how to maneuver and operate an IEP meeting based upon special education law? And you would know because special education law is over 115 statutes. 115. That would have taken you a couple of minutes to learn, right? And the only reason I know even a little bit of what I do know is because I read the federal law. And I'm obsessed with the federal law. And I'm so excited when we implement the federal law because everybody wins. And so when you're in a meeting and you get to a place and you are offended by what somebody else says, think about why you're offended. Are you offended because they pointed out something that needs to be done differently? Are you offended because the meeting went too long? Are you offended because they're asking for the student to have their legal rights? But let's use our critical thinking and think about what it is that we have to serve kiddos with disabilities and how they can win at the best level. And we can do that. All of us can do that. We have that ability. And remember, we're all on one side. There aren't two sides of the IEP. It's just one side, the side of the student. So remember, go be the epic IEP advocate that I know you are, whether you're a parent, an educator, or an advocate navigating the special education process, because believe me, we are navigating this every day and it's full of amazing laws and processes and services. But remember, it's wrapped up in people. And if you learn to work with people and understand that we all see things differently, you're going to be able to serve kids at the highest level, write an epic IEP, serve families, and we'll see you guys in the next training.